Look, this is not a big deal. It's not a big deal at all, in fact, but stop using goblins. Stop using them, particularly if you're running a game for brand new players and they're entering their first ever combat, then the 5th edition Goblin stat block is not a good exemplar of the game's rules, particularly because of the bonus action hide mechanic. And today, I am going to prove it. We'll use you as an example here because your first combat encounter was probably against goblins. In fact, I bet it was against these goblins. These are the guys who waylaid a cart on the way to Phandalin. What happened is you, as a player, rocked up on your cart and you saw 2 dead horses on the road. There were embankments on the sides of the road leading up to a forested area, and in that forested area were 4 goblins waiting to ambush you. This is the goblin ambush encounter from The Lost Mine of Phandelver. When you played this fight, I bet the Dungeon Master's strategy was to have 2 goblins stay back and pelt the party with arrows, while 2 other goblins with shields came forward and engaged the party's frontline fighters. And I bet the action of this combat kind of spread evenly across the battlefield so that every hero got a chance to go one-on-one with a goblin and learn the basics of combat. Because that's the purpose of this first encounter. I want the players to learn the basics of combat. And I'm talking basics. In this first combat, you learned the names of the dice, though you might still mix up your D8 and your D10 because they're the same shape. You learned what an initiative order is, and you got to move your little guy around on a grid. You learned that there are a bunch of different actions you can take on your turn, and you probably know what half of them are. You learned what an opportunity attack is and what a reaction is. And after this first combat, you might think you know what a bonus action is, but you're probably wrong. Now, I'm going to say something which is controversial and brave, and it's probably going to piss you off. That is not the correct way to run goblins, because if you're running goblins correctly, then you should be hearing the phrase bonus action hide a lot. Here's what I mean when I say playing goblins correctly, because there's a great little video game saying which can be applied as a D&D heuristic for strategy called push your buttons. If you are pushing your buttons, you're using your abilities and you're probably making progress. So when you ask, am I playing these goblins correctly? My answer is, well, are you pushing your buttons? There are 3 buttons on a goblin stat block, and none of them are split up and fight the players one-on-one in melee combat. As a bonus action, we can disengage. Also, as a bonus action, we can hide, and in the 2024 rule set, if we attack someone and we have advantage on that attack, we deal an extra 1d4 of damage. 3 buttons. So, in order to play a goblin correctly, we should be pushing these buttons at every opportunity, and every turn will take one of these 2 shapes, the offensive turn or the defensive turn. If you're not in melee with anybody, then you can take the offensive turn, which means you attack from range in a way which hopefully gives you advantage. Then you move towards cover and take the hide action as a bonus action. End of turn. But when you are in danger, you should take the defensive turn. This means you disengage and then move away from the person attacking you and then dash towards cover. But at this point, it's just a theory, right? I've looked at the stat block and I've worked out what I think would be good. Hey, I ran some tests. I ran the Goblin ambush encounter twice. Once with the 2014 pre-gens and once with the 2024 pre-gens. And the results were surprising. If you want, you can watch the full playthrough of both tests down in the pinned comment below, but that's not necessary because I will summarize it right now. This combat is 5 level 1 players versus 4 goblin warriors of the 2024 stat block. The goblins have 10 hit points each, and they flee when 3 goblins have been killed. The 2014 party won on round 7 and suffered 105 points of damage. But the 2024 party won on round 5 and only suffered 50 points of damage. Here's the first observation which jumps out at me here. These goblins did really well. Like, yes, of course the players won, but in both cases, the goblins outperformed the damage output of the players. That's pretty cool. And the goblins were outnumbered. My second observation is about player strategy, because in order to overcome this challenge and defeat the frustrating bonus action hide mechanic, my players had to reach for some strategies of their own and specific rules which I don't think are a priority for a new player to learn in their first combat. And to be clear, this right here, is the only reason I think that goblins are inappropriate. It's because they are designed to use the bonus action hide strategy. And now let me prove it. I'll show you what the optimal player strategy was against this bonus action hide mechanic, and you tell me if these are the kinds of rules you want your players to encounter in their first ever combat when they are brand new players. There are only 3 things generally players should be doing on their turns. Firstly, if the goblins are hidden, then ranged characters should hunker down behind the cart for cover. Then, ready in action. The trigger should be, when a goblin pops out, I shoot at them. But a second option arises if the goblins fail their stealth roll. In that case, the ranged character can shoot that visible goblin and then drop prone behind the cart. By going prone, they impose disadvantage on ranged attacks against them. And while the ranged characters are doing those 2 options, the frontline takes should be doing this. They should be trudging into the bushes, finding the goblins, grappling them, and then dragging them out into the light of day so they can be pelted to death by the ranged characters. Now, I need to be 100% clear with you, okay? I am not advocating for you to run your goblins like some sweaty tryhard, okay? Frankly, I ran these goblins in a straight up antisocial way. It was not fun. But what I am saying is that when I observe the shape of the goblin stat block and I acknowledge the strategies that this stat block wants to employ and the rules those strategies run up against, look, just leave that bonus action hide lesson until later in the player's career. Wait until the players have a grasp on the basics before they encounter these rules. So my recommendation is to find a more appropriate stat block for the player's first encounter. In fact, when we talked about the goblin strategy earlier and I said, they all pair off one-on-one in one-on-one fights against the players, I think that's an awesome learning opportunity for the players, but we should find a stat block that has abilities which incentivize that kind of play. Imagine something like this. Prideful. When you make an attack against a creature and that creature has none of your allies nearby, you're fighting it one-on-one, you get to deal a little bit extra damage. So this would incentivize the enemies to split up and go one-on-one with the players. Or if you want to use an ability that actually exists in the book, take a look at kobolds. Kobolds have the pack tactics feature. This means they get advantage a lot during the fight, and learning the advantage and disadvantage mechanics, that's a really appropriate lesson for the player's first ever encounter. But if you insist on using goblins to teach your players the rules of combat, check out this Better Goblins PDF. It's free. What it does is it takes away the bonus action hide and instead gives them a cover bonus. There are 10 mundane goblins in there and 10 psionic goblins. You can get this for free by joining my newsletter. It's Start a Quest, start-a-quest.com, and all you have to do is enter your email address, click the yellow button, then check your inbox and your spam for the confirmation email. Once you've confirmed, you'll get this PDF delivered directly to your inbox. As a reminder, I'm making videos about the Shattered Obelisk. This is the sequel to The Lost Mine of Phandelver, and you can use these better goblins, the psionic versions and the mundane versions, in this video guide right here. This is a guide to Zorzula's Rest, a goblin dungeon that happens in Chapter 5 of the Shattered Obelisk. By the way, if you're confused if like a different video appeared here at the end clickable bit, that's because I haven't actually published the Zorzula's Rest video yet. I'm going to publish it like in a couple of weeks. But once I do that, what I'll do is I'll put the right video here at the end, and then I'll cut this explaining bit off the end of the video. So this is a limited edition explanation. All right, see ya.